This week on Jerusalem Dateline, a special look behind the scenes at one of the most remarkable stories in the Middle East today. Christian medical personnel risking their lives to share God's love, working together with the Israeli army that's being a good neighbor to its enemy, and counting the costs of going into the most dangerous place on earth. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. For nearly 40 years, the Israeli-Syrian border has been Israel's quietest. But over the last few years, it's become one of the most dangerous. The Syrian civil war that began on March 15, 2011, has left nearly 500,000 dead, millions of refugees throughout the Middle East and Europe, and millions more Syrians as refugees in their own country. But in the midst of all this danger and chaos, Israel is working to change hearts and save lives. Inside Syria, a bloody civil war has raged for nearly 7 years. For the most part, Israel has stayed out of the war. But how could the Jewish state respond to this crisis and to the people on the other side? They decided to be a good neighbor. How far away is that fighting?
Half a mile.
Marco Moreno served in the Israeli military intelligence for 25 years. After the Syrian civil war began, the army assigned Moreno to come up with a response to the carnage.
In the end, we took a very unique path. The path was to offer humanitarian aid to the Syrian side, meaning food, medicine, medical treatment, and help them in their tough hour.
But asking nothing in return.
Yeah. Asking nothing in return. It's kind of thinking outside the box, and it's not something that you can find usually as a set of mind in the Israeli army.
This outside-the-box plan became the Good Neighbor Project. After several years, it's provided tons of food, fuel, and supplies to Syrians on the other side of the border. The military also brought thousands in need of medical treatment into Israel, despite the warlike relationship with the Syrian government. The goal is simple.
To gain the hearts of mine. We said, listen, Syrian, we are your neighbors, okay? We don't want to hurt you. We want only to love you and help you in order to live in peace as neighbors, good neighbors.
And as you say, that it's a game changer?
It is a game changer.
What struck me as one of the most profound dimensions of the whole story was that these were man-to-man, eyeball-to-eyeball relational equity and trust. And that struck me, and I wanted to get involved in that.
Moreno enlisted Dalton Thomas, the founder of Frontier Alliance International, to send Christian medical teams inside Syria.
And the thing is, they don't have anything over there. So they want and need everything on a medical level. The hospitals have all been bombed, the doctors have been assassinated or displaced. There isn't anyone over there.
But who would go into what's become the most dangerous place on earth?
One story that compelled me is the story of the Good Samaritan.
Emmanuel led the first team in and found his neighbors bleeding and dying.
You have everything from chronic disease, whether it's diabetes, blood pressure, and you have somebody who has his leg blown up or his gut spilling out or every kind of trauma that you can imagine.
The conditions are abysmal.
First thing I saw was the hospital. I remember walking down the stairs and I remember smelling, because they had a lot of traumas that day, and I remember smelling the blood and then just walking in and being like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into?
Brittany also found herself in the war zone. She came with Tanya, a surgeon, and Melanie, a translator. They all went into Syria to help those caught in the crossfire. As chief surgeon, Dr. Tanya faced procedures she never saw in civilian life. But why go into such a dangerous place?
If anything, when I read the Bible, what I see is a God who is mighty in battle, a God who intervenes in a time of dire distress or need. So when I read that, it's easy for me to trust God, that God would protect me, that God would shelter me. And if He calls, I believe He will protect as well.
They are warriors. Warriors. How? You have two kinds of warriors. One is carrying a gun, protecting his nation, fighting whatever, like I was for 25 years. The other kind of warrior It's a world with the Bible, with a true belief in his heart. In order to serve the Lord, he needs to do what he needs to do. Syria, it's the dangerous place on earth. Everything can happen in Syria, everything. And they live in bad houses without hot water, bad food, they don't have any toilet, sleeping sometimes on the ground. But they are believers. They're doing it because they love Israel, because they love Jesus. And they want to help, in the name of Jesus, the Muslims. This is a very honorable thing.
Away from the operating room, Dr. Tanya learned how to make bread Syrian style. While they came as neighbors, they left as family.
Welcomed in almost immediately as a part of the family because there was no one else there.
How quickly I fell in love with the people and the community. They were amazing people, and so the day that we left was probably one of the hardest days of my life, just with leaving these people that I had grown to love so much.
The dynamic here is it's a threefold cord. You know, it's three ropes that have been intertwined together, and the bond is so tight. But who would have thought that Syrian, Arab, Sunni Muslims, Christian laborers, and the Israeli army. And the bond between the three is amazing. I think it in itself is a phenomenon and a miracle.
As believers, as Christians, I believe our life is not our own to start with. So I come from that perspective, is the fact that because Jesus has given his life to me, all I can do is give my life back to him and allow him to write the story of my life. So however that story is, I am pretty comfortable with that. Yeah.
They're really doing this because of the audience of one, that he sees it and it matters to him, and he's the one that's motivated this whole thing. And to me, that's the most beautiful part about it, because at the end of the day, everything comes down to the question of, is he worth it?
Indeed, the harvest is ripe, and the Lord is doing something amazing in the Middle East, making a way where there is no way for his message, for the gospel.
Coming up, a look at one of the most unusual camps in the Middle East when we come back. One part of the IDF's Good Neighbor Project includes partnering with another Christian ministry. Like Frontier Alliance International, they're helping Syrians caught in the ravages of the civil war. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl takes a look at how this ministry is working with Israeli Jews to help Muslims.
It's called Camp Ishai, a Christian medical clinic operating inside the Israeli border under the protection of the IDF. It provides urgent medical care to Syrians caught in the middle of a 6-year civil war.
There are about 80,000 Syrians in this area that need medical attention. They arrive by truck at the Syrian border, and they come through a gate, and they're checked for security up there. And then they come through this gate right here into Camp Ishai, where they receive medical attention and love.
From the time they come through the gate, they become the most important people in the world. And we don't speak the language, so we have to speak the language of love.
Don and Sandra Tipton started Friendships, a Christian aid organization working with Israel's Good Neighbor Project to help the Syrians.
It's amazing to watch the transformation in these people when they're not under the oppression of war.
In their first 2 months, they've treated some 2,000 people.
We're putting in Wi-Fi and telemedicine, and when that comes in, we'll be able to treat 3 times as many because it will speed up the process.
This is where patients get checked before seeing the doctor.
Usually it's things like infections, and we had somebody with hepatitis today. There's rashes. So we do a lot of things that if they're not treated, they'll become serious. There are also war injuries and things that people come in and we can treat their infections and things. And we diagnose people that we're not able to treat, and we refer them to various outlets for further possibilities.
While incubators, birthing beds, and x-ray machines are on the way, that's not their biggest need.
Right now, we're in desperate need of people to play with the children, and doctors and nurses. That's our main need. But we need people just to come and help.
That's because Camp Ishai goes beyond medical needs.
This is what we call our distribution tent. Every day when the patients leave, they get this bag full of goodies. It includes toys and clothes. And we have an area where they can shop for clothes that they like, just select what they like.
This is the children's room. These kids, they've been in a war since they were born. They're so happy in here. This is our trampoline. Young people just love it. The adults go nuts. And then behind you we have snow cones, and we have an ice cream machine coming Wednesday.
To the Tiptons' surprise, they found a great willingness in Israel to help the Syrians.
We were trying to find a way through Lebanon or Jordan to get goods into them, and it was a dead end. So we started working with our friends here in Israel.
We had no idea that we would run into such a loving friend in Israel, that they would have the same vision for helping these people as we did as Christians.
After nightfall, CBN News accompanied the IDF on a mission along the Syrian border. We suited up in body armor and helmet and drove to an unspecified location.
I'm standing very close to the Syrian border, where Israel's Good Neighbor Project delivers tons of humanitarian aid to needy Syrians nearly every night.
Today we are putting 10 tons of flour for the Syrian people. You can see the tractor taking all the flour from the big truck. We are doing it each day, 7 days a week.
Major A oversees the entire Good Neighbor Project here on the border. We've hidden his identity for his protection.
We deliver a lot of food, a lot of things for children, from toys, clinic things, all the basic food things. We deliver the things near to the fence, and they are coming and taking them.
Fighting has killed almost 500,000 people and left countless others wounded and homeless. Yet Syria maintains its stance against Israel. So why help?
This is the right thing to do, and this is what Israel country do. I love to do it. This is the best thing that happened to me in this duty.
Major A says about 250,000 Syrians live in the area that benefits from these deliveries. Does he think they'll remember the kindness when the war is over?
I really don't know, but I can hope that they remember.
And just as the Israeli support surprised the Tiptons, Major A has been surprised by the Christian help.
They are lovely people. This is the first time that I saw that a human being can be so generous and so brave and so warm and can give a lot of love.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, along the Israeli-Syrian border.
Up next, a look at the bigger geopolitical picture and what the future may hold for the region. While Israel is doing what it can to be a good neighbor, it faces existential threats from Iran, Syria, and groups like Hezbollah. We talk with Marco Moreno and Dalton Thomas about what dangers the Jewish state faces and what the prospects are for war.
How would you describe the military situation on that side of the border and what dangers it poses to Israel?
On the Syrian side, we have hundreds of armed groups. All, you name a terror organization in the world, we have it here. From ISIS, Hezbollah, we have Iranian here, we have Shia groups, everything. 95% of them with an agenda to attack Israel. But they're not doing it.
And what about the influence, especially of Iran?
Iran is the biggest problem of everything. Iran's agenda is to take terror organizations over the world, especially in the Middle East, sponsor them, give them education, equipment in order to attack Israel. I think what this current administration, the US, Trump administration, is doing very clearly is saying that Iran is the problem. This is a good thing that is happening now, that the administration see the things very bright. What is the problem here?
There's been talk that Iran wants to have a land bridge all the way from Iran to the Mediterranean, including Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria. How close are they to establishing that inside Syria?
Lebanon is, they own Lebanon. Iraq, it's on its way. Syria, not yet, but it will happen. It's a strategic decision that the Iranians took to open a front with us in the Golan Heights. They have it in Lebanon, they have it in Gaza. They have some in the West Bank with a couple of terror organizations, and now they are trying, I think 2018 will be very important for us to deal with this problem.
Do you see a possible war?
You know, in Israel, a possible war is like saying I'm going to eat falafel. It can happen every minute.
Are they getting closer to the border?
They're trying to. They're trying to.
What do you see happening on that, in terms of Iran's influence?
On a very simplistic level, the whole Middle East is a Sunni-Shia conflict. At the end of the day, I mean, even more than let's say a Muslim, Jewish, Christian conflict, the Sunni-Shia thing is just tearing the Middle East apart. And so, you know, looking at the whole issue of this, you know, what's been called now the Iranian land corridor, it's definitely happening. You know, we witnessed it over the last few years in Iraq, seen it in Lebanon. It's apparent. Everyone can see that this is what they're doing. To me, I think that's probably the most significant geopolitical event of our generation that's taking place right now, is the moving of the tectonic plates within the Sunni-Shia world. That's a huge conflict, the Sunni-Shia issue. And so for Israel, who finds herself right in the middle of those rubbing tectonic plates, it's a big issue. It's going to be the big issue for the next 10 years. And I think Israel was looking, from a security standpoint, looking at the situation when the revolution began, seeing that no matter how this thing ends in Syria, this is going to be years of conflict between Sunni and Shia, because win, lose, or stalemate draw, the divide is just going to be further galvanized. So it's not, no one's going to win this war. No one wins any wars, but this is a war, no one's going to win this. No one comes out of this and wins. It's going to be a generation of carnage. And I think as believers, I think what we need to do is think with a long-term mentality and a short-term mentality. You know, it's the response, it's the reaction to that. And, you know, the decimation of Mosul, the decimation of these cities that were held by Sunni militant groups, that's really, at the bottom, that's really the heart of this conflict, is the divided house of Islam. And so this raises a question: how should the church respond to the divided house of Islam? We can ignore it, we can just throw rocks at it, or we can engage. And I think by engaging in the heart of that conflict is one of the most important things that we can be doing in this generation.
So how can people be praying about you, your team, Marco, and the IDF and the people inside Syria?
3 things I pray almost every day. Colossians 4, open up the door for the word to be clear as it ought to be. Psalm 91, in the safety and the shadow of your wing. And Matthew 9, Lord, thrust laborers into the harvest. You know, Jesus is very clear. Don't say 4 more months till harvest. Now. So I think if we pray from a position of now, you know, I think prayer is a terrible excuse for obedience. Terrible excuse. However, I think we should obey and pray. Meaning, let's not do the 4 more months of winter thing. Let's do the engage now. But as we go, let's do it from a position of prayer. And so the way, you know, the spirit of prayer that I want to operate in is one that marries prayer and obedience. That says, I'll pray for this, but I'll also engage in this thing.
Coming up, what it means to put your life on the line and count the cost. What struck me while covering this story was how these believers in Jesus counted the cost and put their lives on the line. Take a look at some of the people you've already heard from in this program and others who went inside Syria. Debbie Dennison, a trauma nurse, and Dr. Sally Parsons, a general surgeon, sometimes went to YouTube to find out how to perform a surgery they had never faced before. They knew the dangers going in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I need.
I considered that I could lose my life there, but I considered that if he called me there, he was going to sustain me through that, and that everything was going to be fine.
Continuing our walk. This is the house that was bombed the other night. You had to count the cost. You had to say, do I love you enough that I'm willing to lay down my life? Of course. And my answer was yes.
Dennison's husband, Barry, had to count the cost too.
My wife is bid in. She's a trauma nurse, and for the last 7 weeks they've been doing surgeries, delivering babies, proud of her, and proud that she's able to do it in conjunction with FAI and the IDF. A totally unimaginable situation a year ago.
Tell me about the bombs. What happened?
So that day, about 40 barrels bombs came to that town. Out of those 40s, I would say a quarter of those lands right next to the house, because our house was built next to the mountain. So when they land, they ran right next to the house.
Emmanuel saw a biblical parallel in his decision.
First, I think the core of it is understanding that the Lord is writing the story. And I was always compelled by Daniel and his friends when they said, the Lord is mighty to save us, but even if he doesn't, it's worth going to the fire. So with that, I think it was just a beautiful thing for me to stay rooted in knowing that the Lord is mighty to save me. But even if he doesn't, I think it's worth.
That's truly remarkable and inspiring. If you'd like to know more about Frontiers Alliance International or Friendships and would like to volunteer for these kinds of assignments, you can reach out to these organizations on their website at faimission.org or friendships.org. And please pray for the safety of these brave men and women and for the Syrian people caught in this deadly civil war. That's all for this special edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.